Richard, it is so good to have you, our co-host, Richard Haggerty, coach of coaches, and fantastic, fantastic coach, awesome person, fun guy to hang around with, great dad. So make sure
Oh,
that you follow Richard and get to have all those opportunities that he offers, even for free, just to join in, be inspired, and follow the information that he is so kind to share every week.
that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Oresztesz. I really appreciate that. And look, likewise, back at you. Amazing, Dad. Your daily videos that are going out, people really need to make sure they're subscribed to your YouTube channel. And I would imagine that Less Anxiety Today is probably the easiest way to stay in touch with you, because there is so much good content going out there. There are links on there back to the website, to your lovely Facebook page. But there was some really good stuff going out. And of course, we're doing this here now to kind of shine a lens and a light through everything that's going on. But I really encourage everyone who's interested in personal growth or developing their own confidence to really take time to do that and see what you're up to, because I think that it's only getting better. And I think the need to really harness your mindset, harness your state, look after yourself with some practical, actionable stuff that you can do in just a few minutes, well worth your time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there are always there are always new opportunities and better ways to think about yourself and the way that you are engaging with the tasks that you set for yourself, the way that you are engaging with life, the way that you are reacting to the things that the world is offering you. So I definitely think one of these things, one of the most important things I would say, is sticking to a growth mindset. The
Mm-hmm.
idea of making sure that whatever you engage in, you understand that it is a process. Always looking at more of the long-term process instead of individual results. Anything that you engage in, just my first premise here, what I think is very, very important to keep in mind always, is that one of the most powerful things I believe that human beings have demonstrated is our ability to adapt through time to all sorts of situations. There have been, especially now, it's an interesting thing because there are so many things that are changing currently. There are
Mm.
many things that are not looking good. The 2 years of adapting to a pandemic have really created some ripples economically, individually. Many things have rearranged themselves. Opportunities have arisen, but many opportunities, many things that we were used to have their doors closed. So there are many reasons that people might feel desperate, anxious, or worried about how the future is going to turn out. Now, the one thing that history has shown us is that somehow human beings will adapt. They will find a way. They will figure out. They will focus on new resources. They will create new ways. There will be new opportunities. Something is going to happen, and somehow human beings end up adapting every single time. So one of these ideas is the flexibility, the capability to adapt. And possibly a smaller set in that same idea is the learning. People not just adapt physically, that not only our bodies get accustomed to, for example, me moving from the middle of Europe to Mexico, it is a lot hotter here, and eventually your body adapts to it. But also the mind, your understanding of the situation. You will gain new perspectives. You will figure out how things work in a new environment. You will learn. So whatever you engage in, the one of the basic ideas is just this deep trust in the human being that will adapt and will learn with how to cope and how to make the best of any situation.
Perfect. I think that's really powerful. Look, depending on there's a big debate going on at the moment about the dating of certain archaeological structures around the world, but we do know that humans managed to survive basically ice ages and huge challenges throughout history, and we've thrived. And this idea of the mindset, of a growth mindset, of learning and being able to adapt, it's absolutely fundamental. And the trick, as you say, is to see everything as a process. And if you see it as a process that you can learn from, then your personal history, things that have happened to you, take on or experiences you have are just opportunities for learning. Now, I have to tell you that I'm really excited at the moment because I've been doing some research around mindsets, and some of the research coming out, and there's a paper just out on where they've looked for the first time over a long period of time on what they call a defense mindset. And what they basically mean is the child learns at school or very young with their parents to be defensive. They've, for the first time, tracked what the outcomes are of somebody who learns that at an early age. All right. And we might have been able to think about this before, but honestly, a higher defensive mindset early on significantly predicts more violent adult outcomes, even incarceration.
Wow.
Economic well-being, social relationships, all of them negatively correlated. Now, the thing is, the good news, at the same time, there's a new paper that's been studied showing that just being educated about what you're talking about here, just being educated about the concept of a growth mindset is enough to cause changes. They can actually measure them through fMRI scans. It's enough to cause changes in people's brains. So just being educated about this, probably at any point in somebody's life, is enough for them to be able to counter this. And so it's a really important thing, just as you're here today, just as you're listening to us, just to be aware that this exists. And the reason that it's so powerful, Oresztesz, as I know you're familiar with, is that if somebody has a fixed mindset, and this is a third paper that's also been published, just looking at this concurrently, just iterating really what we know before. If somebody has a fixed mindset, well, this is, in fact, the research paper was on this, which is fascinating. If a teacher, or particularly here a lecturer, professor, has a fixed mindset, which means they don't think that making mistakes is good, they think it's they get embarrassed by it. Their students can detect this, and their students rate them lower, and they learn less. Why? Because the only way we can learn in life, like when we have kids, we have children, the only way they could learn to walk was by falling over. The only way you can learn to speak a language is by making lots of mistakes. And the only way you can become a productive human being in the world is to go out and do things and meet people and make mistakes. And so the only way to enjoy life and thrive in life, exactly as you say, is to understand that it is a process.
Absolutely. There is no other way of growing. And the interesting thing is, anything that you find yourself reasonably good at, to any degree, and it can literally be anything. You can even think about things that you wouldn't consider as skill. So for example, many times I offer this concept to my clients because they will feel like, well, I'm not good at anything. And well, that's not quite possible. You are good at something. Maybe you don't value the thing that you're good at. Maybe you don't appreciate the thing that you're good at. Or maybe you don't consider that being good at that thing has already demonstrated that you are capable. You, as a person, you can do things. It can be something that you just do for fun, and you don't even think how much better you are at it than many others, especially someone that hasn't engaged with that. Or even yourself at the beginning of comparing yourself your skill level now to when you began. The common examples of this can be just doodling. Someone that likes to draw just a little bit, they will have much better skill at it than me, for example, who I have never engaged in that activity. I did have a very harsh few occasions where they were judged early on, and I decided, yeah, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this, so I'm just gonna stop. Singing, dancing, things that people enjoy doing, but it can be things that you don't even think about as skill. For example, at some point with another hypnotist, I was exploring the idea of making coffee, and like, you don't even think about it. It was very skillful from the other person's exploration, but it turned out that I am really much better at making coffee than anyone else in my family. In fact, whenever people want to drink coffee, they ask me to do it first, because I do it most of the time. But also, there are little things that you do learn over time. My kids have made coffee for us, and it's, you will find entire grains of coffee. It's not ground properly. They don't fill it up with the amount, the time of serving it, the mixing it. Tiny details that you do not think of. But because of the way in which you engage with this, it is actually something that does require growth, learning, mistakes. Obviously, I did grind coffee a few times in the wrong way. I did leave some things out of it. So at some point I turned it on without water. And when I got back to it 20 minutes later, so you make these little mistakes, but it can even be something that you actively diminish, like, I don't know, playing video games, or just listening to music, or watching TV. Even those will create some kind of learning. You are going to be much better in skills that, for example, some people in my family, my in-laws, for example, they need to ask me to come and check the remote control whenever anything goes a little bit off the beaten track for them, what they know. So even things like that you do not think of as something valuable will have shown you elements of how the growth mindset actually works. So
yes,
every single one of these things will include the growth mindset naturally. You will have stopped worried about making mistakes. You either just do it for fun, or even if you are aware of your growth, you are much more focused on the outcome, or how you eventually want to be, not how you are right now.
it's really interesting as you're saying that, Oresztesz. So first one, thinking I'm coming to yours for coffee when I come to Mexico.
Cheers.
Cheers. But I'm also thinking, this idea is really interesting, because there are things that I do. For instance, I love writing books, and I love writing. Recently I've been doing a lot of courses and master classes on many different topics. And I was thinking what to focus on. A friend of mine said, look, you've always, ever since I know you, enjoyed learning strategies, how to learn. And I said, yeah, and that's just been a big thing ever since I was at school. And so I went to school. In my new school, when I went to boarding school, they started doing some spelling. In my old school, they said you were good. And in the new school, they said, well, you're not so good. So they asked me to leave the classroom and go to this little wooden shed they had on the edge of the campus, and just go and sit in there. And they had a few cards in there, a little light, and no real instruction. And out of that, I started getting interested. I thought, well, I'm going to have to start to figure out some ways to learn. And eventually I found ways that work for me, visual ways to learn that worked really well. And ever since then, I've been very strategic about things that I do. Now, the thing is, I do that automatically, and that's just fun things I do. I write, I organize stuff automatically. And it was only later on that other people said, this is valuable, this is useful, this is helpful. can you? In fact, it wasn't many times in my life people have done that, but I realized eventually that was something that I could cultivate. Now, the other thing to say is, which is allied to your examples here of like the coffee and the doodling, is that when you're talking about coffee, there's a smile there. There's a sense of playfulness. There's a sense of fun. So I'm willing to bet that however much the frustration was with the coffee there, that your playfulness and your fun and your desire and your attitude and your willingness to give a little bit of attention to that helped you along the way. And this is the thing, exactly like you say, Oresztesz, is that we all have the ability, we must have the growth mindset in us in some areas of our life. And the key is to just upgrade that into other areas, because that's fundamentally what the world is really crying out for. Going back to what you were saying at the beginning, all the old, everything's up for debate now. Every concept, every the things that should be the most basic, are up for debate, and that's okay. In some, it's fine to discuss things. But once you are happy and you are able, that you recognize in yourself that you are able to do that, that you're already doing that, then you can start to bring those same qualities, maybe a little bit more attention, a little bit more playfulness, a willingness to engage with something and laugh at it a little bit, or laugh at yourself a little bit in a warm and gentle way, so that you carry on with that. And when you're making coffee, or if you're enjoying a meal, I've just made some falafel that I'm going to cook later. So I made them for the first time, and I really enjoyed it. Like, I didn't know what it was going to be like. I didn't know what they're going to look like. As I'm making these patties with hopefully the right level of ingredients, I don't know. I'm just curious to have the experience of frying them and tasting them and seeing other people's faces. And let me tell you, I'm going to get some feedback immediately.
Absolutely.
Of how we can do this. But I'm excited because I can take that and I can enjoy that. And I love food and I love finding things that people love. And if you can, once you can get on that kind of growth mindset train, then you can take that train, you can get that to more and more destinations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really like one thing you mentioned, and fortunately, I believe I haven't been the target of any of the political debate here, but I do see some people affected by it. I have had some college students as clients that feel really stressed out about the way that some of the current discussions are happening. And I know that in the UK it has reached stages where tabloids come out and just really clickbait titles of things that sound very illogical and very extreme, and some actions. So I cannot really say how real they are. But what I think the part that is relevant here is that any discussion where the arguments try to shut down the communication, it goes exactly against the growth mindset. If you allow for confusion, as you mentioned, it is very much okay to not be completely deeply set in the current ways of thinking. It is a good idea to keep questioning it. It is part of the scientific method. That is how you always, even as you write your paper and you write your theory, and according to the scientific method, you better look at the things where your theory is weak, further investigation, that according to the things you have discovered, what is your recommendation to continue exploring? I mean, you have to stop at some point your paper and say, okay, this is what I currently think, and this is how I interpret these results. But you do want to make recommendations, like, okay, so you know what, I discovered this. If this other thing is true, if this other thing can be proved, then that would really put my theory at in question. And these are the things that I discovered that, I didn't have, you cannot go endless. These are the things that require further investigation. These are questions that arose. These are things that I will investigate at some point, or you reading the paper get to do. But all of this continues to keep the mindset open for future growth. And even the writing of the paper, it's already questioning the previous ones. It is already putting them together, or trying to make a meta-analysis of all of them. But the idea is that the flexibility is there. Questioning things is allowed. You do not want to be stuck in any argument that is made saying, no, this is just wrong and this is how things should be, from either side. Because, also people that criticize some of the new and different ways of thinking because they are sometimes very extreme. It also has to include, okay, well, you know what? You have a certain point here. There are things that were not very good. You are maybe just, saying something at this level so that you are heard at this level because things were this bad before. And that's
sure.
Okay. You can understand that this is not a good place to be. Maybe this isn't the best way to say it, but you also want to, sometimes you need to make some noise to change things up. But the idea, I think, that is very important for us, if we want to allow actual growth to happen, is considering keeping our minds open, allowing for different ideas to come in and entertain, or maybe even look for what could be true, or what could be partially true about whatever someone else is telling us.
Agreed. And I think that's it. And I remember this a few years ago when I was a really sort of epiphany for me, when there was somebody who was saying that they didn't like a certain kind of person, and I said, well, go on, well, tell me a bit more. And I just sat there and listened, and they said, oh, well, it sounded on the face of it like, I guess you could say racism. I said, well, just tell me more. And they said, well, I've got these people. It turned out that they had some people living next door to them who culturally were very loud and messy, and they couldn't sleep at night, and it was affecting him in his job. And if you take the time to listen to someone and hear them out and try and understand it, then, at the most basic level, people want to feel heard and listened to. And actually, on all sides of any debate that's going on at the moment, people want to feel safe. They want to feel heard. They want to feel listened to. They want to feel understood. They want to feel that things are fair. And so you're right, both sides can dial up the noise so much. That unfortunately gets amplified through the echo chamber of social media, because the algorithms there are set to pick up the most extreme things of that, whereas mostly people are still trying to adapt and figure things out. And the majority of people want it to be sort of fairly open and inclusive. Now, it is and there's no perfect way. I think what's happened, you're right, the 2 years of the pandemic really catalyzed a lot of things. There were a lot of, for whatever reason, it's catalyzed a lot of different things. And the thing is just to learn and be open to it. We had a really funny situation here. So we've got the World Cup going on in Qatar at the moment. Culturally, it's very different there. And I had a number of members of my family and friends saying, I don't like the culture over there, so I will not watch the football. And I thought to myself, well, look, they are football fans, not so much me, although have watched it. I've watched a few different countries. I quite like to see the different cultures, and I thought, look, if you want to change something, then you have to be willing to engage with that culture, and you have to be able to be a model for tolerance of that culture, and you have to understand, and you have to be able to discuss with them to try and to not even keep the communication open. Gives no option to it. It's not talking with somebody. It's like the parent who won't talk to their kid, who thinks that's the best way to demonstrate to them that they better learn their lesson. And so I mean, I agree, and I think ultimately the reason that I would have a habit of keeping the dialogue open is if you want to foster the growth mindset in yourself, you have to be willing to listen to those examples of yourself where you have been doing well and haven't recognized it, and maybe also consider those aspects of your ability to do things that maybe you don't feel you can at the moment, but that with a little bit more gentleness, a little bit more tolerance that you can exercise in your daily life, that you can bring that to bear on yourself. So I think that it ends up being a kind of, I don't want to say karma, but it ends up being kind of like anything that you practice, whether you practice it internally or externally, it will benefit both ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know. I wish I don't know if you could indulge me a little bit with a little exercise that might be interesting for any of our listeners to follow along. You are a masterful hypnotist, so I wonder if you think. Just a 2-3 minute exercise, because we shouldn't really run way too long here. But how about what do you think would be a good way to revivify the growth mindset? Just this kind of keeping the dialogue open, keeping our mind open, maybe revivifying a moment that has to do with being like this, and a few suggestions. I don't know what do you think would be a good way to help our listeners that can tag along?
Well, I think, yeah, for sure. I think, look, I think the easiest way is look, I would say, look, with your coffee thing, right? It sounds as though there's a story behind the coffee there, Oresztesz. I will be the first thing to say, that there's a story. There is some reason why that popped to mind, and there's some reason why you went with that. Okay, so you could do that with eyes open or eyes closed, but it's really helpful because there was a time when you couldn't make coffee as well as you did, and there's a time now when you can make it masterfully. The master coffee maker in your house, in your domain. So I'd invite you to think of one of the times when you were learning how to do that, when you went to make a coffee and something didn't quite go to plan. And I see you smiling, and maybe you can think of one of those times. And something happened. And inside, as you're feeling like this, there's something you say to yourself or something you decide that lets you learn from this experience. Now, I don't know if you're immediately laughing and smiling as it's happening and thinking, okay, I better remember this next time, and taking that warm feeling or lesson with you. Or maybe it was when you were sipping a cold coffee later, or with some grinds in it, and thinking, you know what? I am not going to do this next time. Or maybe it was just taking that warm glow at some other time. But I do know that you were engaging with the idea, you were learning, and something happened. And as you're there, that's right. And something happens. And it's not quite the way you want it to be. And at a certain point, an insight, an awareness, the good feeling that happens when you learn something and get insight, an aha moment perhaps, however small or subtle. Maybe it gets expressed almost like a warm glow. And you know that next time you're doing something else in life, Oresztesz, something new, a new project, something with your business, something with learning. I'm curious. With this same feeling, that's right. And the same feeling, the same breathing, this same way of being can go with you and surprise and delight you. Now, so whenever you're ready, comfortably, just come on back.
All right. Fantastic. So I hope you, our listener, has also had a very nice experience just coming back from this. For me, Richard, what I appreciated the most out of this was the moment of another element that kind of really stood out as you walked me through an example of making a mistake and being okay with it. Mm-hmm. And that thought was a very visceral or very deep sense of it's not the end of the world. These were the literal words in my head. And it was I have to admit, it was a little bit easier to do with coffee, that I would just, I would just have to wait another 15 minutes to make it. It doesn't matter. That really isn't the end of the world. But just as we kicked off today's conversation with the idea that we always end up resolving, adapting, adjusting, learning and growing and getting back up all the way until the end. I mean, that's what we do as human beings. Which just immediately implies that none of the mistakes is going to be the end of the world until it is, and then again it doesn't matter then. so
that is a great point. Well, I love that reframe, and I would tend to agree, Oresztesz, and I really like the fact that first of all, that idea that it doesn't matter because it's not the end of the world, and it isn't the end of the world. And so the fact that it's not the end of the world means it's okay to try new things. And why not start small? Why not start small with the coffee, or something even smaller that you feel okay with? Because then once that muscle gets strengthened, then we can go up to the big stuff. Then we can go up to world peace. But we've got to build those muscles up. Yeah, we've got to build those muscles up for tolerance for other people's learning curves and other those people who maybe are not so elegant, and for our own sort of bigger kind of mistakes as we go. Because, like you say, it's not the end of the world until it is.
It isn't, but it is the end of the podcast. So I hope you take this advice with you and practice it. Practice it in the little things, and practice it even more so in the big things. As you plan for them, as you execute, as you look back on them, even you might just go back at something and remember that it was not the end of the world. So I hope you have something to take to heart from this episode. Where can people reach you, Richard? And where can they find those amazing workshops that you're putting out?
Sure. Well, if you go to if you go to Twitter, Richard Haggerty on Twitter, you'll find me there. You also find a link to my weekly newsletter, and you can find you'll be able to access. You'll be able to get in contact with me there. So that'll have links to all the stuff that's going on.
Excellent. And of course, you can find me on lessanxietytoday.com, the Less Anxiety Today YouTube video channel. Just make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you like this video. Share it with some people that might need to remember that things are better looked at as something to be learned from, as instead of disasters. And if you have a comment or a question that you feel like doesn't fit, if we haven't covered something, or it feels like, yeah, what you're saying is okay, but how about this? We'll love to answer your questions. So look forward to hearing from you. Take care and see you next week.
Cheers. Bye-bye.